Let's start with a quick joke. Nafar will appreciate the joke. There's an old Israeli saying, it's hard to say, I don't know, that whether you have a boy or a girl is fine, as long as there's a bris. Ben or Baz, right? Doesn't make a difference. You have a boy, you have a girl. As long as you have a Brit and there's a party, we don't care what you have. Right? That's what they say, Nafar? You can't have a girl. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about a girl who was born in a family of boys. She herself was almost born a boy. Don't ask. A lot of cool stuff. Let me start by saying that tonight's class is Le'ilai Nishmas. Yitzchak Tzvi and Yosef as the Neshama should have an elevation. I am looking at the comments. Hello, everyone that's watching us online. Lost my. Here we go. Boker Tov from Australia. Shalom, Heidi. Good evening, Eddie. Hello, Joseph Kavanagh. Hello, Art from Michigan. And where's our chat on this page? So good, so busy. Hello, Faith, everyone. Okay, ready? Showtime? Showtime it is. So, here's the story, my friends. We're going to talk today about a young girl called Dinah. Very interesting story. We're going to actually just start at the very beginning. What? Good class. I didn't even say anything yet. Just said the name. I got a compliment. Okay, Baruch Hashem. I'll take it. Okay. So we're going to talk about Dinah. We'll start in the very beginning of Dinah's life. What's the beginning of Dinah's life? Or her birth. Yeah, well, before she was born. Yeah, very good. Very good. So we start tonight, chapter 30. Last week's story reading, verse 21. Leah, just to very quickly get you up to speed, has given birth to 6 of the 12 tribes. Okay? She now becomes pregnant with her 7th child. Says the Torah, chapter 30, verse 21. But I'm watching all the comments, and afterwards we'll go through and say hello to everyone. So afterwards, she bore a daughter, and she named her Dinah. Doesn't say she conceived, like all of the children says she conceived, etc. She just suddenly she bore a daughter and called her Dinah. So Rashi tells us, what's the story of this girl called Dinah? So Rashi tells us that our sages explained that Leah pronounced judgment upon herself. The name Dinah is from the Hebrew word din. So Dana din al atzma. Leah judged a judgment upon herself. What was her judgment? She reasoned, if this child that will be born will be a male, my sister Rachel will not be esteemed even as one of the handmaids. So she prayed over him, and he was turned into a female. Okay? Let me first explain. So all of the mothers were prophetesses. So Rachel and Leah both knew that there was going to eventually be 4 mothers that would give birth to 12 tribes, which is why Leah was very happy when she had her 4th child, and she said, now my husband will really, I actually really thank Hashem, I had more than my fair share. But if you remember, she's now had 6 boys. Both of the maids have each had 2 boys apiece. That's already 10. So if this next child that will be born will be a boy, then Rachel will have at max 1 of the 12 tribes, which would be very, very difficult for her. And therefore, as a result of that, she says, a judgment upon herself, let this child that was already conceived, the boy, look at the language of Rashi, the boy was already conceived, and he was turned into a female. And when he was turned into a female, it didn't go through a gender-changing operation. It said that an angel came and changed the wombs around. And Yosef, who was going to be born, was then placed into the room of Rachel, which is why Rachel immediately after becomes pregnant. And Leah has Dinah. So we see already that that Dinah and Yosef have a very interesting relationship. And I want you to hold this in the back of your head, because I will go back to this later tonight, that Dinah and Yosef were swapped pre-birth in vitro. Yes.
It was already set in advance that it was going to be 12 tribes?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, not only was it said in advance, they knew that. And
I thought that Bilhah and Zilpah also had a few of the kids that
They did.
tribes.
So Bilhah had 2 boys, and Zilpah had 2 boys.
But how come they became also part of the tribes if they're not from the mothers?
Okay, so they were married. So the question that Nofar is asking is, why are the children of Bilhah and Zilpah considered tribes if their mothers were not really mothers? So first of all, if you were last week's class, you would know that Bilhah and Zilpah were actually half sisters of Rachel and Leah. They were also daughters of Lavan. He treated them like maids because their mother was a maid. Secondly, in those days, Judaism was defined not by your mother, but by how you believed, which is why many Jews are converted under Abraham, and then they didn't remain. And next didn't stay Jews, because Judaism was a system. Only by man and son did it become a covenant between us and God that became forever, whether we are observant, not. But that only happens later on in history. So here we have the opening story of Dinah, her birth, a very unique birth, a birth that even before she was born, already her mother judged that she shouldn't have Yosef, so Yosef went to Rachel, and she was born instead. Now she grows up with a lot of big older brothers, right? She's the first girl of 10 older brothers, and then Yosef will be born shortly after, so 11 brothers. Binyamin won't be for a while. I mean, even Binyamin eventually. And even though there is an opinion in the Gemara that says that all of the tribes had twin sisters that were born, that's why they married, but on the simple reading of the Torah, she didn't have any sisters. She's the only girl of a lot of boys. And I wanted to remember that fact as well, because later tonight I'm going to go back to that as well. Okay? So we have a few things about her childhood. The brothers switch with Yosef. Obviously, she's a certain confidence and a certain go-getter, male kind of, getting out there. Those days, most girls stayed home. The boys are out. That she definitely had. Okay. Now, we're going to skip ahead. Rachel, yeah.
Did the mothers know that the child was switched in the womb?
That's a good question. Did Leah know that God heard her judgment and switched the baby? That I can't tell you. I don't know. That I don't know.
It's just the soul. Because I'm thinking, like, if they knew, wouldn't they love that other child more than their own child?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. It's a good question. If they knew, I'm going to guess that she prayed for it. She prayed that the child should be a girl. So when she had a girl, and she had 6 boys, so she must have known that God heard her prayers. Right?
But not that he switched the baby. It was already formed.
Okay. And let's say she didn't know. Whatever.
Yeah. Better she shouldn't know.
Better she shouldn't know. Well, we know. So if we know, it's a good question. If we know, then she probably knew. Let's go further. Now Yosef is born, and Yaakov starts to work for Lavan for 6 years. Finally, it's time for them to leave. She's about 6, later she's going to be 8.5. She's a young girl, and they are traveling back towards the land of Israel. They escaped from their father-in-law Lavan, and now they're coming back to Israel to meet Esau. And what happens? So let's read a very interesting another verse. That also is a story about Yaakov meeting Esau, but somehow Dinah, by not being in the story, is actually very much in the story. You want to see how this happens? Chapter 33, verse 23. So that night, Yaakov arose during the night, and he took his wives and his 2 maidservants and his 11 children, and he crossed the ford of the Yabok River. Now, who's missing in this verse? Dinah. His wife mentioned, his 11 children. Hold on, 11. He had 12 children. He had 11 boys and 1 girl. What happened to her? Why is she not mentioned? So Rashi tells us, in his 11 children, where was Dinah? So it says Rashi, Binyamin wasn't born yet. Dinah should have been counted. So we're told he put her into a chest and locked her in so that Esau should not set eyes on her. Therefore, listen to this, my friends. Jacob was punished for withholding her from his brother, because had he married her, perhaps she would cause him to improve his ways, and therefore instead, because she didn't, she fell into the hands of Shechem. That's what Rashi tells us. The Medrash is even more explicit. The Medrash says it very blunt. The Medrash says that God was so upset, they said, you didn't want to give your to marriage to your own brother, who's Jewish and circumcised, therefore shall fall into the hands of a person who's uncircumcised, will take it without a marriage, without a marriage document. That's not fair. Okay. So Barbara wants to know, how is that fair? That's a good question.
But his daughter is a bit like 30 years younger.
Esav?
Yeah.
Yeah, he would be much younger. He would be, Esav is the same age as her father Yaakov, yeah.
It's like marrying your father.
That's a good point. What?
A little different those days.
A little different back then. I mean, there's also a big age difference, but she's a young girl, and yet she had tremendous potential. I hear Michael asking, how is that fair that she's getting punished for not giving the, I hear you. It's a very strange Rashi, and Rashi didn't make it up. The Medrash is much more explicit. Because you wouldn't give him to your brother with a regular marriage, so she'll end up in the hands of the uncircumcised prince of Shem. What's wrong with Yaakov protecting his daughter from not marrying Esav? Esav was a wicked man. He was, I'm sure, a pretty terrible husband. He was all over town doing lots of immoral acts. So why is Yaakov being punished for locking his daughter in a box and not to say allow the daughter to be able to have an influence on Esav? Good question, huh?
Yes.
If you think about it for 2 minutes, it actually is like a very it's a deeply bothered question. Why should Yaakov be expected to give his daughter to Esav? That's your question. My question too. When I decided I was going to teach this class, I did not know the answer to that question. So I set myself up for a challenge, actually, to make sure I can find an answer. But I found what the Rebbe talks about. We'll get there soon. I'm going to get there. We'll finish the story. We'll get there. But it's a very deeply, deeply perturbing question. But also the answer, if we can understand how or why Yaakov should have taken Dinah out of her box, could also give us some insight into our own lives and when we feel safe in a box and when we need to leave our own box. Okay, well, we'll get there in due time. We have the question. Dinah is not mentioned because Dinah is in a box, and Yaakov, as Rashi says, is punished. These are the words of Rashi. He's punished for withholding her from his brother, because had he married her, she would have caused him to go back to improve his ways. Oh, how do you know? The fact, okay, so it's an excellent question. How do we know that Dinah would have had an influence on Esav? By the way, your question was Yaakov's question. That's exactly what Jacob said. Jacob said, I'm going to give my daughter to, how do I, even though even Yaakov obviously understood the ability of his daughter to be an influence on Esav, but it wasn't a guarantee. If you want to get really into the technical in the Hebrew language of Rashi, it says Shema tachzirenu l'mutav. Shema means perhaps, maybe, if you would have, in Yaakov's mind, it was only a maybe. Even though in the perspective of God and the Torah, it wasn't a maybe. In the perspective of the Torah, she would have influenced him in a positive way. And because she missed that opportunity, she would have to suffer as a result of it.
She suffered, and it wasn't even her fault.
It wasn't her fault. Okay.
If his fault influenced him, then how are they saying she's
You're saying it's another good question, which we'll also answer. If Yaakov couldn't influence Esav, what do you expect from this little girl, Rachel? Not Rachel, Dinah. Good question. This is highly, highly disturbing Rashi. And the Medrash, I don't have the Medrash in front like I read it. It's not here in the sheet that you have in front of you. The Medrash is like straight up bashing Yaakov. Because you were, these were selfish, but because you were held back from your own brother, your daughter that would have influenced him, not as a maybe, but as a for sure, you're going to suffer. That your daughter will end up in the hands of this prince of Shechem. Well, we'll see if she was punished, if she actually fulfilled her mission. We'll see. It's a very important question. All of you that are watching online, don't go away because we're going to go back to all this. That's my hook. You're on. Okay, they're watching. Yes, it's a really perturbing question, and it bothered me too. I was like, let's understand this. And the Rebbe deals with this. And the Rebbe gives a beautiful, transformative explanation to really understand who is Dinah. But I can't tell you the explanation yet. First of all, because I want to tell you the rest of her life story. Secondly, because until you know the rest of the story, you won't understand what the Rebbe says anyway. So we need to continue the story. So let's continue the story. They survive the encounter with Esav. If you know the story from this week's Torah reading, Esav and Yaakov meet, and Esav hugs his brother, and they kiss, and they lovey-dovey. They all live happily ever after. Esav says, come, let's go together. Yaakov says, you go ahead. I'll catch up in the right time. Esav leaves, and Yaakov, instead of going home to his father and to his mother, what does he do? No, he settles in the fields there. He sets up camp, puts up tents, makes a place called Sukkos. He puts his sheep. He settles. He doesn't pay back his neder. He made a vow to pay back the tithe. He had made a vow to God when he left Israel that if you'll take care of me, when I return of everything you give me, I will give 10% back to charity. He doesn't do that. He doesn't go back home to his father. He's taking his time. And while he's taking his time, this Dinah, according to one medrash, was 8.5 years old at the time. Dinah decides that she wants to go out and see the world a little bit, right? So what happens? Let's read the opening verse of this story, because the opening verse is going to shed a lot of light in our understanding of the identity and personality of Dinah. So chapter 34, which is the chapter that deals with the story of Shechem kidnapping Dinah, the opening verse of the story is as follows. Well, let me just look at the comments 1 second. It goes back to this those men. No one wants their daughter to, I just hear a lot of comments here. No one wants their daughter to, no one wants their daughter to marry a creep. I get it. Esav is a brute. We get it. Men knows men. Yaakov knew who his brother was. That's for sure. You're all correct, by the way. And it goes back to dishonoring your brother. Dinah was mentally distracted. I don't know what that means. Okay. So a lot of very, very good comments here. A lot of good comments. And you're going to see how the Rebbe is able to explain this story of Dinah and give us a fresh perspective on what was her life's mission and what was her identity. But let's first look at this verse in chapter 34, verse 1. The Torah tells us, Vateitse Dinah bas Leah. What does that mean? The daughter, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out. Went out. Where did she go out? She was home. She went out to go see the girls, whom she had born to Jacob. She went out to look among the daughters of the land. So Rashi asks a question, why is she called the daughter of Leah? Notice the verse. Vateitse Dinah bas Leah. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, who she had born to Jacob, went out. So Rashi tells us she's called the daughter of Leah, not the daughter of Jacob. Mark. However, because of her going out, she was called the daughter of Leah. Since she, Leah, also in the habit of going out, as it is said, and Leah came forth toward him. We'll get there soon. Concerning her, they devised the proverb, like mother, like daughter. So what's Rashi saying on a very simple level? She's described not as the daughter of Jacob, the daughter of Yaakov. Jacob didn't go out. Jacob was a man that sat in the tent of Torah and studied and was talked about on Shabbos. He was a Yosef Olim. But Dinah is the daughter of Leah. There's a verse in chapter 30, which we'll talk about in 2 minutes, where Leah went out to greet her husband. Remember that story? Well, after when with the flowers. I'll get to that story. I'll go to that story soon. She went out to go greet her husband. The Torah says Leah went out to Yaakov. And therefore, we're like daughter, like mother. Just like mother, like daughter. Just Leah was an outgoing personality. Someone who went out of the whole realm. What? So fragile and crying. Okay, very good. Excellent. Very good. Hold that thought. So if you read this Rashi, it seems pretty harsh. She was an extrovert who kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. Girl out of the box. She went out into the countryside to go see the girls and see what's going on. And as a result of that, she ended up in trouble. That's the implication of how you would read it on a simple level. Correct? Give me a look. You're waiting. So we have to understand, basically what Rashi is telling us here is that the identity of Dinah is a outgoing person, a person who is a yatzanis. Yatzanis is a word using in Rashi, yatzanit. She goes out. She's hanging out in place, running around. She's all over the place. It's worse than yatzanit. Oh, yatzanit is a prostitute. So that's the word that Rashi uses. Afi yatzanit haisa. But that's in modern Hebrew. Anyway, so I will explain to you how we understand this identity of Dinah in 2 minutes. Let's first just finish the story, because I know some people are watching on Facebook and they don't even know the story. And then Lynn asking a good question. Why are we chastising her mother Leah? It's an excellent question, Lynn. Stay tuned. Let's just first say the story so everyone knows what we're talking about. So Dinah goes out. Actually, how does she go out? So Dinah is very, very beautiful. She's also the daughter of Jacob. It says later she was born to Jacob, so she was very famous. Everyone knew about her and heard about her. She was an Instagram model. I don't know, a TikTok star. And so Shechem heard about this girl. So Shechem was very desperate for her. He wanted her, the prince. So what did he do? He sent the whole band and the girls, and they were playing music and instruments and dances. And she got curious to see the dances. And when she went out to go see what's going on, that's when he had her taken to the palace. She comes to the palace. He seduces her with words. Tells her, look, your father had to pay so much money for one field where your family lives. I'm the prince. One day I'll be the king. Look at all the palaces I own. Look at all my wealth. Look at all my gold. And he seduces her with words. He's with her in a normal way. He's with her in a non-consensual way. And he rapes her. And he takes her by force.
What did you mean by the first part? He's with her in the normal.
It says both. He seduced her. And then when she wanted to leave, he raped her.
So she had sex with him willingly?
Well, she was seduced. She was seduced. She was seduced. So what happens? Now he feels guilty, Shechem. He feels guilty that he took this girl by force, that he's holding her, he's kidnapped her and holding her against her will. She wants to go home. He's taking her against her will, and he wants legitimacy. So he sends his father, who, whatever the prince wants, right? The spoiled little brat, to go to Yaakov to get her hand in marriage. So Hamor, his father, comes to Yaakov and says, come, let's live together in peace and harmony. Our daughters will marry your sons, and your sons will take our daughters, and we'll do business together, blah, 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 blah. As long as the whole, And at first Yaakov says nothing. The kids come home from the field, Shimon and Levi, and they speak with the deceit, and they say, sure, but we can't be together. We can't intermarry with uncircumcised people. To marry uncircumcised people, that's not okay. So what? So that's they got circumcised. So they agreed. So they said, everyone in the city will circumcise themselves. Then we agree, and then we'll allow our daughters to marry your sons, and your daughters will take, etc. So what happens? The prince says, everyone, time to get a circumcision. And guess what? They did it. Well, most of them did it. That's the story everyone knows. Now I'm going to tell you some very interesting medrash. So the medrash actually says that there was a brother called, page here, Chedkam. Chedkam and 6 of his brothers refused to get a circumcision. And they saw all the people in the city of Shechem, like a bunch of blind, crazy people getting circumcised, which in Canaan, to get circumcised was considered a disgusting act to do. You're maiming yourself in a very horrific way. So they got very angry. And Chedkam and his brothers said, we're going to go get the other cities around, the other neighboring towns, to come and kill you all for circumcising yourself for some Jews. Are there not enough Canaanite girls around that you can find to marry that you need to circumcise yourselves and deface your body to marry some Jewish girls? So the people of Shechem realized that they made a mistake. So they felt bad about what they did. So they promised Chedkam and his brothers, as soon as we recover from our bris, we'll go and we'll kill the family of Jacob. And then Dinah will be ours without any problem. So Dinah heard this and she sent a message to her brother somehow that they were planning after they recovered to kill the family of Jacob as revenge for having made them circumcise themselves. In the meantime, Shimon and Levi, who at this time are 13 years old, on the third day after the circumcision, when the person is most weak and most, in pain, has after their own surgery, the third day is harder. Okay, that day they come, 2 men, and they killed the entire city of Shechem, all the men. 600 men or something were killed by these 2 people. Can you imagine 2 young kids killing a whole city? 600 men were killed. Happens. Here's another, what? Games of Thrones. Yeah, everything they got it from. I don't have it in Game of Thrones, but okay. So, by the way, here's another fascinating medrash. I was prepared this class. So there was 20 men that escaped from the city of Shechem. You didn't know that, right? That's why you come. 20 men that didn't get killed. They escaped to the neighboring town of Tapuach, to the king called Yivshi. And they come to Yivshi and they said, Bnei Yaakov killed our entire town. Go take revenge. And the king didn't believe them. He's saying 2 boys killed the whole city? Impossible. So they sent spies, and the spies come back to this king Yivshi, the king of the city of Tapuach, and say, yeah, it's true. The city is destroyed. All the girls were taken by Yaakov, like all the men are killed, the city is pillaged, it's destroyed. So Yivshi starts to gather a massive army to fight against the family of Jacob which is why in the Torah Jacob is so afraid that they're going to come kill us, etc., etc. He's very, very worried. And just to make a long story short, it's very interesting. A huge army of 10,000 of soldiers gather from all over, all the Amorite kings and Canaanite kings, because they thought that this is Yaakov is starting to take possession of the land that they knew had been promised to Avram's descendants. So they felt if we don't fight, we're going to all be destroyed. What happened? Yehuda, who's even younger than Shimon and Levi, starts to encourage his family. Yaakov was afraid. Yaakov, if you look at the Torah, he was afraid of what's going to happen. And he said, you guys made the waters dirty. We had a clear pot, a clear jug. I mean, now you made it like you shook it up. Everything is dirty. Yehuda is the one who inspires his brothers to get ready for war. They gather all the servants of the house. They sent messengers to Yitzchak, who is still alive in Hebron, to send people. He should pray by the grave of Abraham. Yitzchak sent his own servants to go help fight with Yaakov. There's 112 men in the army of Jacob against thousands of soldiers. And the servant goes up onto the tree and he sees the thousands of soldiers. He tells them what's going on. Yaakov was praying and Yitzchak was praying. And Yehuda, this little boy, is gathering everyone, getting them into battle positions to fight. In the meantime, what does God do? He starts to push panic and fear into the hearts of all these soldiers. And they start to say to themselves, we're going to go fight against these people. Don't you know how God saved Abraham from Nimrod and he threw him into the fiery furnace? He survived Nimrod. And then when Abraham, with mud, with sand, won a war against the four mighty kings, and Esav came to kill Yaakov with an army of 400 men, and he couldn't prevail over him. Esav was known to be a tough guy. We're going to go fight them, and two boys killed the whole city. Are we crazy? So they all fled, and the army got afraid, and they demoralized, so the kings were left with nobody, so the war never happened, and nothing ever happened.
What happened to the girls of Shem?
Oh, excellent question. What happened to the girls of Shechem? I'll answer that question too. Okay. Now, what's the end of the story with Dinah? Just to finish the story. Thank you for this watching. There's so many questions on this chat. I'm going to answer everything. Stay tuned. Let's just finish the story. That night, that day, that Dinah was raped by Shechem, she becomes pregnant. And she gives birth to a girl called Osnas. And Osnas is sent away. She's not welcome to the family of Jacob because she was born from this rape. She is sent away. The angel takes her, whoever it is, and she's adopted by Potiphar's wife. Because Potiphar is actually called Potipharah because he had been castrated by the king. One of the signs when a pharaoh made someone an important minister, to ensure their loyalty, they would castrate them. So they couldn't, play around. So Potiphar was castrated by Pharaoh. They couldn't have kids. So Potiphar's wife adopted this girl, Asnas, that was actually born to Dinah and Shechem. And this would eventually become the wife of Yosef. This daughter of Dinah from this time. Now,
I would say that's why the Potiphar's wife tried to seduce
Yosef. Because she saw in the stars that she was destined to have children with Yosef. It wasn't her, it was her daughter. Correct. So that's the story of Asnas, born from Dinah and Shechem. And then when the brothers came and destroyed the city, so I'll tell you about the girls in a minute, but Dinah didn't want to go. Dinah said, I'm embarrassed. I'm like damaged goods now. No one will ever want to marry me. She had been raped. She'd never been married. She would never get a husband. So Shimon promised to marry his sister so that she wouldn't feel embarrassed to leave. So according to one opinion, Shimon ends up marrying Dinah. She becomes the wife of Shimon. There's another opinion. The Gemara in Baba Basra says that she became the wife of Job, of Eov. You heard of Eov? Job? All his family died. So there's a verse in Job where he talks about his wife, which is a reference to Dinah. He was alive at that time. He was one of the three advisors of King Pharaoh. She became the wife of Job. That's the end of the story of Dinah. As far as the gossip goes. And now we're going to try and answer all of the many, many questions that were asked. And I'm glad. I love seeing so many questions. I really appreciate it. And let's understand, what does it mean, like daughter, like mother, like daughter? What does it mean that the definition, the identity of Dinah is to be this yatzanit, this girl is going out, that's, out there, so to say, out of the box, out of the safety of her family, that she's considered just like her mother Leah. And the source is a verse in chapter 30 So let's go look at the source in chapter 30, where the Torah tells us that Leah is an outgoing woman, okay? You guys with me? So let's go look. Rashi told us, I just point this out. So Rashi told us that she's called, Dinah's an outgoing girl because her mother was called going out. But when did Leah go out? So this is chapter 30. I'm going back now a few chapters. When Leah went out to the field to greet her husband Yaakov, chapter 30, verse 16. When Jacob came from the field in the evening, and Leah came forth toward him, she came out to greet him. And she said, you shall come to me because I have hired you with my sons Dudaim. Dudaim are flowers. And God willing, next week's class will be about Reuven probably. And they were actually for infertility. And we'll talk about the sensitivity of Reuven getting his mother these flowers. We'll talk about these Dudaim next week. Stay tuned, same time, same place. Even though we're having this fun, we'll still teach. Isn't our job to teach? I think so. I love this class. I think so. So we'll talk about commercial right now for next week. Our end of the year matching campaign. Okay. We'll talk about it. Start. We need help. Yeah. Okay. So what happens? So Leah comes to Yaakov and says, "You shall come to me because I have hired you with my sons Dudaim with the flowers." And he slept with her on that night. What happens that night? Listen to verse 17. And God hearkened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. What does God listen to? The verse says, God listened to Leah. He hearkened to Leah. She didn't say anything. She said to Yaakov, you should come to me tonight, right? What is God hearing? Rashi tells us the reason why Leah conceived that night. She wasn't supposed to have more children. The fact that Leah conceived on that night that she, quote unquote, hired and paid for the rights to be with her husband by giving her sons flowers to Rachel, God heard. What did God hear? That she desired and was seeking means to increase the number of tribes. That's what Rashi says. So God heard that when Leah went out of her comfort zone, Leah is not a girl that goes out. When Yaakov comes to find a wife, who's out there by the well, Leah or Rachel? Rachel, not Leah. Leah, as Vivi correctly said before, as a girl is crying, she's not out there in the field. And yet Leah was so desperate to have more tribes and give birth to more Jewish kids that she went out of her box, she went out of her comfort zone, goes out to the field, says to her husband, even though it's not my turn tonight, I have given away something special to me, the love of my child, in order to have your love so I can have more children. And God hears that her heart is pure. By Yishma Elokim Leah, God listens. God hears that when Leah went out, she went out with purity. She went out with holiness. She went out with the purest of intentions to have more children. And God rewards her for that and says, because you went out and did extra to have even more time with your husband, therefore you're going to have a child, the fifth of the 12 tribes. So when Leah went out, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's an amazing thing. The fact that God hears her and God makes her pregnant is the ultimate proof that God sees how pure her heart is, that God is rewarding her for it. So now let's understand. Rashi tells us that why does the Torah say that Dinah went out to see the girls of Shechem? Because she's an outgoing person like her mother. Her mother's going out was an ultimate act of dedication to the building of the Jewish people.
So why did you describe it?
So exactly, good question, Vivi. So why are we describing it in a negative way? Good question. Good question. Very negative. Or negative. Or is it negative? Is it possible that your entire life you've been reading this Rashi in a negative way when actually Rashi is really saying something very positive? Which is what the Rebbe does. Volume 35, the Rebbe explains. This Rashi is not criticizing Dinah. For all the questions here, Dinah is not being criticized in a negative way. You have to understand what is the core soul, what is the divine identity or destiny of Dinah. So let's go back. And if you remember last year we did a class on Leah, we talked about this idea, but I'm going to repeat the core idea and explain to you the spiritual significance of the soul of Leah and the destiny that she avoided and was then given to Dinah. we know that Leah was crying a lot. Why was she crying a lot? She was crying because she had heard that she was destined to marry Esau. Now, if she only heard from some yente, you know what a yente is, right? Some yente would have said, man, all the girls gonna marry the older women. That wouldn't be a reason why Leah would cry. Leah was crying not just because some yente said that she's going to marry the older Esau and her younger sister will marry the younger boy Yaakov. First of all, Rachel and Rivka and Lavan had sent letters agreeing to that. But besides that, she understood. We talked. Leah was a prophetess. Leah understood that her soul's destiny was bound up with the destiny of Esav. Esav was her bashert. Esav was her bashert. The reason why she cried so much is because she didn't want Esav as her bashert. And so when she knew that my soul is destined to be involved in the struggle of refining and transforming and elevating the intense, crude, raw potential of Esav to channel him to holiness, Leah said, I don't want that job. Why was Leah destined for that job? Without getting too into it, again, you can go find last year's video, we'll post it. But Leah and Rachel is a tzaddik. Rachel does not relate to evil. Rachel is perfection. Rachel is a goody-goody. Leah is a girl of struggle. Rachel means a sheep. Sheep are docile animals. They don't know what evil is. They don't know how to be wild as we told them to. And Leah comes from the word le'ut, which means to be tired, to be worn out, to be fatigued. Leah is the concept of avodas hatshuva, of a person who struggles with evil and is able to overcome evil. That is the unique quality of Leah over Rachel. She's not inherently beautiful. Rachel is born beautiful. Rachel is born talented. Rachel is born to be a beautiful, spiritual, in every physical and spiritual way, to be perfect. Leah is not born that way. Leah was born to struggle. Leah was born to fight evil and to transform evil. But Leah didn't want that job. So Leah was able to do such intense prayers that she was able to remove herself from having to be involved in the rectification of Esav. What happens? This job of elevating and rectifying Esav now gets passed on to the next generation. Not to Dinah, first to Yosef. And in fact, when Yosef is born, we are told that's when Yaakov comes to his father-in-law Lavan and says, now that Yosef has been born, it is time for me to go back to my family, to go back to Esav, because Esav is compared to straw, Yosef is compared to fire. Anyway, Yosef, unlike his other brothers like Reuven and Yehuda, who are righteous people, Yosef too contains within himself this unique ability to deal with an evil world, to deal with a world of struggle and temptation and seduction. And exactly. The other tribes could not have survived in Egypt. If you would have taken Reuven, a holy man, and put him in Egypt, he would have completely fell apart. Only Yosef has the ability to not only not be destroyed by Egypt, not be corrupted by Egypt. It is only Yosef that has the ability to remain true to himself and to influence Egypt and to transform Egypt and to circumcise Egypt and everything he does. Only Yosef could do that. So the one that carries on.
He was really Leah's son.
Correct. Yosef is really Leah's son. And then what happens? Dinah takes his place. Remember I told you they were switched in vitro. Dinah and Yosef are switched in the womb. So Dinah is now considered to be like mother, like daughter. The qualities that Dinah had that made her the bashert of Esav, that made her spiritually able to not only not be influenced by Esav, but to change Esav. Those qualities of transformative ability, those qualities of being able to transform someone, now her daughter Dinah had those qualities. And Yaakov knew that. Yaakov knew that. And when Yaakov is coming to Esav, Yaakov has a dilemma. My father Yitzchak wanted to refine Esav, but Rivka said no. Esav wasn't ready yet. Leah had a chance to refine Esav. She said no, he wasn't ready yet. I know that if I allow Esav to have my daughter to influence Esav, Shema tachzirenu lemutav, she might bring him back to righteousness. But in Yaakov's mind, it was only a Shema, it was only a perhaps, it was only a maybe. And therefore, Yaakov decided, I don't want to take the risk. I'm not willing to take that risk. And so instead of allowing his daughter to fulfill the mission of her soul, instead he locks her up in a box. He locks her up in the box. And when God sees this, God is not happy. And God says, since you locked up your daughter and prevented her from utilizing what she was created to do, she's going to end up in the hands of the uncircumcised man in Shechem who won't have a marriage contract. Dinah bas Leah comes to chapter 34, the verse that's in our Torah reading. And Dinah goes out. Why does Dinah go out? What is she going to see? I'm going to show you something amazingly beautiful in the Hebrew text. And for those of you that read Hebrew will appreciate the beauty of the words I'm about to read to you. We're going back to chapter 34, verse 1. Dinah, she goes out. For what purpose? Liros, to see. What's the next word, Nofar? What does that mean? What does bivivno ta'aretz mean? Beis, bivno ta'aretz. To build. But if she was going out to see the daughters, it would say lirot, binot, ta'aretz. The letter bet at the beginning of a word is a prefix that means in. She went out to see inside the Bnot Haaretz. Correct? Is that what the Hebrew says? The Hebrew is not written straight if you're reading the story that she was simply a curious girl that wanted to go out and go sightseeing. If she wanted to go sightseeing and she wanted to just check out the neighborhood and check out the new fashions and the new styles, she would have gone out Lerot, Binot Haaretz, to see the girls of the land. That's not where she went. She went to see Binot Haaretz. What was the potential inside the girls of the land? What influence could she have on those girls to bring them closer to a life of monotheism, to a life of serving God, to a less materialistic, hedonistic lifestyle? And guess what? You ready for the kicker? You ready for the kicker? Marsh asked me a question before. What happened to the girls? So Yaakov's family, the sons Shimon and Levi, killed 600 men. Where did the girls go? Girls don't live in the city if there's no men left. All those girls were taken as maids and shepherds, etc., in the house of Jacob. All those girls Dinah went to go see, she actually ended up fulfilling her divine mission, and all those girls were brought back to the house of Jacob. They were all brought back to the influence of the house of Yaakov, to the influence of Dinah, to the influence of a holy, moral family. So we think that Dinah goes out if Rashi on the simplistic level. What is Rashi saying? She's an outgoing girl like her mother. She didn't have any boundaries. She didn't have any respect for staying in her lane and staying in her box and staying. No, she went out to go transform the girls, to utilize her inherent potential of transformative abilities that she had to go and influence people. Remember, she grew up with boys. She wasn't afraid to go out and be an influence. Most girls were hidden. She was from the family of boys. She was ready to go out. You understand how beautiful this is? And then she got away. You have a question?
I do.
Yeah.
I want to know why.
I'm looking at the charts. Yeah.
Sent out. She did a good thing by bringing the 600 boys back, but it seems like she was finished and then she lost her family. They sent her away.
Well, no, she married her brother.
Or did she marry Joe? No, I don't understand.
It could be later. I don't know. It didn't happen right away, immediately afterwards. The fact is, all those girls were brought to their house. She fought, Lyle was saying, she fought with light. Exactly right. So the Rebbe explains is that how did Dinah influence the people? Because a woman can have a certain influence in the way that a man can't have. A woman is able to influence in a certain way of nurturing and of love, and doesn't use the word light there, but in a certain way of nurturing that a man couldn't do. A man just conquers. The woman was the one who was able to do that. So the other brothers, they couldn't transform all the girls of Shechem. Dinah could. Very, very beautiful lesson for us here. What's the?
She didn't transform anything.
She brought them all back to her house.
Well, they had no choice. There was nothing
Who cares? But she, that's true. You're right. You're right. They had no choice. Fine, granted. But what's the end of the story? What was the result? The result of Dinah's going out was even more than she expected to achieve, that all those girls are now brought back to her home. Who said that? So in Judaism, we judge success not by what you planned. We judge success by what you achieved. And Vivi agrees with me. Okay. I'm good to go. No, I didn't say that at all. That's not at all what I said. I said that the fact that the actual end result of her story was a good ending proved that it was a good ending. She had a real influence. She fought with light and she was successful. She was successful. So what's the lesson for us, my friends? What's the lesson for us? Where's the meaning in the Bible? What? Get out of your comfort zone. Very good, Sidel. Get out of your. Yaakov made a mistake by putting his daughter into a box. He thought he was being righteous. He thought he was being protective over his daughter, but he was actually inhibiting her ability to truly shine and to truly fulfill that which her soul had been destined to accomplish.
So if Leah wouldn't want it either. Leah probably said put her in the box, but Leah didn't want it for herself.
That's a good question. Leah didn't want it. That's true. But the fact is that God said Dinah is capable of doing it.
So if she brought 600 souls back, she saved 600 girls, how's that as a punishment?
It's not a punishment. There's no punishment. So to all the comments here before that we get punished for our sins, Dinah wasn't being punished. Dinah was out there transforming a city. Yes, it happened in a negative way that she was raped. That's true. That's true. And there was shame. So that's true. Yes, that's very true. But that's what I'm saying is her reason why she went out was a noble intention. And the end result, although it was not the way she planned it, and although she suffered, she did suffer. I'm not saying she didn't suffer. But the end result was that she had an influence. She had an influence in the way the other tribes didn't. So let's give a practical example. Let's say you have a co-worker who's Jewish but doesn't observe any holidays, totally not involved Jewishly. And so Hanukkah's coming up, and you can invite him to your house for a Hanukkah party. You can bring him a menorah. We're going to get menorahs next week. You can bring him a menorah. So here's a menorah, here's candles, go light the menorah. So what do some Jews say? I can't do that. It's not my place. I got to stay in my lane. I got to stay in my box. I'm not his rabbi. Not as a spiritual mentor. We're co-workers. We do business together. I'm a client. I'm going to start telling him how he should observe his Judaism. That's not my place. The reason why our souls come into the places where our souls come is to influence the place where we are. If you take that opportunity and you lock it up in a box, if you take the fact that you have a Jewish coworker, a Jewish client, or a Jewish neighbor, or a Jewish friend that's not going to light menorah, and you say, well, it's not my place to tell him, and you take that opportunity that you could influence him, and instead you lock it up on the key and and say, I'm not going to get out of my zone and get out of my comfort zone and start, preaching to the people that are not interested in hearing me preach, then you're like Yaakov, taking this talent, this gift from God, and locking it in the box. That's really not be afraid to go out of our box. And since we have 5 minutes, finish off with this following idea. The question is that we have to ask ourselves, make sure we're good with the comments here. The question we need to ask ourselves, where Dinah may have gone wrong, where Dinah got into trouble, was when we allow ourselves to be influenced instead of being the influencer. You understand? So when we go out into the world, when we go out of our box and we engage the way Dinah went out to engage, there's a very big danger. I mean, Yaakov was right. There's a danger. What's the danger? The danger is you could get influenced. Maybe Dinah won't make Asa righteous, and instead, Asa will make Dinah corrupt. That's the danger. right? And perhaps, I'm not judging Dinah here, and I don't know, won't say what happened, but the fact that Dinah ended up being tempted and seduced by all the music that was being played, perhaps she allowed the environment to influence her. How do we ensure that we can be out of our box? See, let me go back a second. When you're in your box, you're safe. When you're in your box, you're safe. You're protected, you're sheltered, your identity is clearly defined. Everyone knows who you are because it says it right there on the box, right? So everyone knows who you are. You don't need to protect yourself. You don't need to struggle to define yourself because the box says it for you. When you go out of your box, now you're vulnerable. You're exposed. It's dangerous, spiritually dangerous. Not so easy to go out of our box and not be influenced by the environment in which we're going into. So what's the secret that Vatetse me, Vatetse you, that I go out, you go out, Dinah goes out, that we go out of our box, not of our comfort zone, and we don't lose our identity? Strong roots. Strong roots is a good answer. Any other answers? So I'll tell you a story I've said many, many times. I love this story. One of my, Marsha's heard it from me before, probably.
I love hearing
You're very kind. What's the secret? We have to know that we're there to influence. We have to know what our soul's mission is. We have to know that our soul came to influence Esau. And if we know that we're there to influence, we won't be influenced. So here's the story. There was a girl, I think that it's Mrs. Garelik from Milan, Italy, who was like the head shlucha. So it's 60, 70 years ago. She was a nice, very nice a Beis Yaakov girl in Flatbush or Bar. Growing up somewhere in New York. Her family was not Chabad, but she went to Beis Yaakov. But she knew about Chabad, about like being an influence and being a Dinah and going out and inspiring others. So she had a custom, Shabbos afternoon. There were a bunch of non-religious Jewish girls that lived on her block. Every Shabbos afternoon, she would invite these non-religious girls to her home for a Shabbos party. They would come hang out Saturday afternoon. They were home. She was home. She was bored. So she would invite them every single Saturday. They would come over to her house, and she would put out some snacks. She was a young girl. She was in Beis Yaakov. It was high school. Beis Yaakov, she put out some snacks and whatever, and they would learn something. They would say some sukkim. They would chill out. They would enjoy. They were celebrating Shabbos. One day, the principal of Beis Yaakov, I don't know if it's Flatbush or whatever it was, found out about this. And he calls this very nice girl into his office. And you think he was happy or upset that she was having non-religious girls in her home? Very upset. And he says to her, "You're a religious girl. You're a Beis Yaakov girl. You can't socialize and interact with these non-religious girls. It will have a very negative, detrimental impact on your spiritual standing, on your spiritual identity." So imagine, he told her, you have a pot of boiling hot water, sitting and cooking in Beis Yaakov, getting heated with the beauty of Torah. And then you go mix that hot water with cold water, with girls from the streets. It's going to cool off the hot water. Just see it to hang out with these girls. It's going to cool you off in your connection to God. Well, let's have me finish. So she couldn't argue with that. It's a good argument, right? How could she argue with the principal? The principal said, if you're going to engage with non-religious girls, it's going to spiritually cool you. So she's cut off connection with them. And then, let me finish the story. Don't take the question. And then, years later, she grew up. She went to Chabad Yeshiva and all that. She became a shlucha. And she realized, what was the flaw in the principal's argument?
He wasn't Jewish.
No, of course he was Jewish. He was a religious man. He was a rabbi. He was a rabbi from Beis Yaakov. What was the flaw? The flaw is that it's true that if you put cold water into hot water, like our urn over here before, it will only cool off the hot water if the hot water is not plugged into the fire. But if that pot of water is sitting on the fire, or in this case, if it's plugged into the wall, if the urn is plugged in, not only will the cold water not cool off the hot water, but the hot water will heat up the cold water as well. As long as you remain connected to your source, as long as you know where you come from, and you remain connected to Torah, you remain connected to the fire that heats us up, then not only will going out into the world not weaken us and not dampen us, but the opposite. We'll be able to influence them. So yes, it's risky to go out of your box. Last night I was speaking to another rabbi. I was at an event, and I was speaking to the rabbi. He published a book, and we would have a whole conversation about like being, going out there. And many rabbis are afraid. It's much easier. It's much easier to not say anything, right? Sit home. You'll never make any mistakes if you never go out. You'll never say anything wrong unless you're married. You know what I'm saying? But you'll never say any mistakes. You'll never hurt anyone. You'll never offend anyone. But if you want to fulfill your soul's mission, you need to get out of the box, go out of our comfort zone, and be a light into the world, and be a Dinah who uses the unbelievable potential of her soul to learn, to nurture, and to love, to be able to transform those around us, those in our sphere of influence, to bring them closer to God, to Judaism, to Hanukkah, etc. Okay, my friends. Laila Tov. Laila Tov.